Yay, thank you all for coming tonight. We're so excited. Thank you, JJ, for presenting your translating motor learning into practice. We're super excited to hear about it. And for those of you who just jumped in, we're gonna, if you can just stay on mute like you are, and then when you have a question, you can unmute and go ahead and ask your question. JJ will be able to field your questions like that. So don't worry about like waiting, or you can type it in if you really want to, but feel free to unmute and ask a question too.
Or add anything. You don't
or add anything. Okay.
I was gonna say, no need to ask questions. I kind of know that, or I definitely know that I'm preaching to the choir with this group. And so originally the intent was Summer, don't start. The intent of this course, I wanted to put something together for CSM to see if I could get accepted with one of my graduates who's a clinician, just mainly to try to focus on translating the knowledge, the information into practice and trying to focus on motor learning. But the motor learning stuff is so exciting, except it can kind of get overwhelming. So I wanted to kind of have a strategy where you could kind of check off in your head some of the key pieces. So we kind of came up with MIA, trying to be cute, but also from a memory standpoint of motivation, intensity, and attention. And then so that when you're kind of interacting and doing your treatment, that you would think of it that way. So this took a second to be able to advance my slide here. It worked eventually. I think, there we go. Just so that you know, the handouts that are posted is the handout I gave out at CSM, and the intent of the handout was just to be a quick reference that you could have at your desk with some of the key pieces of reminders. But for you guys, if because I edited this presentation, obviously it's a 2-hour presentation, so I edited it. I actually took out the cases, and thought if someday in the future we wanted to do cases, there's a stroke, someone with a stroke, someone with a spinal cord injury, or no, TBI and Parkinson's. But I think that overall you kind of get the feel for the sections, highlight a lot of the pieces, and I'll try to put those in there too. But if you want me to PDF this later and get the PowerPoint, that's fine. I will give that to you. And then I just acknowledged mainly our NAS pro bono clinic, because that's where I got all the videos. And then my husband, because he did all the videoing. So he loves his videos and wanted recognition. So there we go. So, but today I'm just going to focus on the MIA part. And so I took out the history of motor learning part for tonight. And again, the cases, but I'm going to just do a little bit of some highlighting some articles, and then go straight into the M and the I and the A. And I can't see my screen. So I'm going to try to move that over. So I have to put in a knowledge translation implementation slide, because that's like my love. And it's just great because you guys are a group where we're all aiming for the same thing. We just want to take what's in the literature and synthesize it and really be able to improve our clinical practice by trying to keep up to date with that. I don't know why that keeps doing it. And just as a reference, some of you guys are familiar, but I think these are some good references in regards to how long it takes to disseminate new knowledge. And that's what I really like doing is, disseminate. My dog is driving me insane. So I'm going to keep talking, but I'm going to let her out because she's not going to stop, obviously. I thought she'd lay down. But essentially how long it takes to disseminate information. Sorry, guys. No husband means I'm going to have to let him back in eventually too. Sorry about that. But we know that it takes that so long to get it to get the research back into practice. And so all of us, I think we're really good at trying to reinforce that. And what I found interesting was I took a sabbatical and just focused. I taught at another school for a semester, but I also focused on motor learning. And when you look at the motor learning, I think a lot of us are familiar that it's been the last 25 years that they've been really reinforcing motor learning and working on translating that into rehab and taking some of the information from athletes. But it's hard. It's obviously harder to transfer it to our population because all of us see such varying people. But I think the overall emphasis, and again, trying to cluster some of the key pieces of motor learning into these different treatment areas is extremely beneficial. And what I found the most interesting when I was studying the motor learning pieces were, there are some really, really simple, very straightforward things that you can implement that isn't about the greatest treatment in the world per se, but is about small strategies that are really beneficial from the literature standpoint. And I think all of us, so the motivation, intensity, and intention, I think we're very familiar with task specificity and salience. So I want to talk about that, but give some examples of the ways we can adjust cues. So I'll talk about that. I'll spend a lot of time on intensity as a big, huge benefit in regards to all the different populations, and then how we can adjust attention, whether it's adjusting your attention to the task, or patient's attention to the task, or the environment and what kind of cues we're giving them. So all of that to me is was obviously very exciting for me to look at. I edited this part down, but I just wanted to highlight, and I think Claire mentioned, I don't know if it was one of our small group meetings or it was a bigger group, the Accelerated Skill Acquisition Program, or Optimal. You referenced one of them. And really what we tried to do was Chris and I, we went through the literature extensively and tried to find some common themes. And these were the most common, most studied right now approaches looking at motor learning. And so I'm not going to go into them in detail, but if you're familiar with the Accelerated Skill Acquisition Program, or the ASAP, you know, Lethway and Lethway and Wolf, they've done so much research in regards to motor learning, and I just love all of their articles because they really talk about strategies that can be really beneficial. And when you look at the ASAP, they talk about the motivation, which, you know, is pretty self-explanatory, it's the skill, but then they also include impairment mitigation, or the capacity. And that's one really huge interest of mine. Is it's not just about getting them on the treadmill and walking them forever. You know, like, you have to have an underlying understanding of what is some of the primary or the primary impairment that you could make the biggest impact on to improve the patient right then. You know, you can do as much treadmill walking as you want, but unless you kind of really address that hip abductor weakness or that hip extensor weakness, you know, that compensation is critical. So I really liked Carolee's focus on really making sure that we're not losing sight of impairment mitigation. And I don't know if any of you guys remember, it was like a few years ago at CSM, and I just felt like every talk I went to was like, oh, don't worry about the impairments, you know, just walk them, and just walk them intensely. And it's like, well, yeah, we do have research to support that, but we really can't forget this component. So the literature, or the research that they did, really kind of emphasized each one of those components. So we looked at that article, but, you know, so we looked at these not three articles, because when you go to, I don't know why this is doing it. When you go to the challenge point, there's more than one article. And again, I edited some of this, but, you know, the challenge point references and the articles about how do you find that perfect point of challenging someone? You know, how do you find that level of intensity? And I'll talk about this in the intensity section. But that research is really interesting in regards to, you know, increasing the task difficulty, and then how successful they'll be. And I think that's what all of us struggle with. And when I lecture to therapists, you know, I think everybody always asks, well, how hard is too hard, and how hard, you know, should we be pushing them? And I don't know that any of us really know that answer. It's just, it's the just right challenge, you know? And so it's more of, if you see them and you're not helping them, and you're observing them and they're doing it right a good chunk of the time, I always say bored now. And if I'm bored now, their brain's bored, and so they're not being challenged. And so can I add more? And then if I add too much, like, big deal. You guys won't see the cases, but in one of the cases that we showed, we got a little crazy with our person with traumatic brain injury, and we added the wedge to facilitate motor adaptation. Then we added the weighted vest, and then it was like, oh yeah, he fell over every time, and it was just like error all over the place. And so that was just too much. But so what? You know, then you take it away and you tell them, okay, we overdid, and he was fine with that. I think a lot of our patients appreciate the fact that we're trying to challenge them. So we liked that research. So we kind of thought about the ASAP research, the challenge point research, and then the optimal motor learning kind of foundational approach. And they kind of, again, they look at their similar focuses, but this one had the external focus and really emphasis on autonomy. And so each one of the kind of foundational examples of different research that's going on, I liked each one of them, but I felt like each one of them was missing something. So that's why we kind of made our own. And when you look at, like, all of us and the therapists out there, when they looked at the research, they said, we're all incorporating motor learning strategies. I think, and I'll just speak for myself, I was doing some of it, but I didn't have a name for it. I didn't know there was a name for it. And I think that sometimes I could have been doing it if I would have just adjusted my wording a little bit. And that's a hard habit for me to kind of break. So we'll talk about that when we get into the different sections. So just to highlight, that beginning section when we presented, or I guess I presented at the conference, because my co-presenter had a medical emergency and couldn't present. So I ended up presenting all of it. We had a little bit of motor learning history in there, and then we had those articles kind of highlighted a little bit more. So just so that I kind of give a picture of the differences with this presentation. But then the big meat of the presentation, which is what I wanted to make sure that I had time to talk about, was the M and the I and the A. And then I think you guys, I would just welcome any suggestions, because I'm sure you have better ones and different ones of things that you've utilized that you're like, wow, that was a really good one and that worked really well. And if it's anything that you guys feel like you did that really made an impact with your patient that's related to these areas, I would just welcome you to share those. So starting with the M part from the motivation, I think as you remember that first slide, I talked about salience, and we know this, that we need to make sure that things are salient. And I am surprised sometimes, like in our neuro clinic, with the students, I drill in their head to ask them about their goals, and sometimes I'm really surprised by what the patient says and what they actually want to work on. And I think sometimes people don't ask, or this is what they've said, because they know that they're going to say something that they really can't ever do. And so that makes them, feel bad. But sometimes you just take parts of that. But I think that just some things from the literature, what do you want to accomplish in therapy? I think that your top 3 goals or your top 2 goals, if I'm working with someone who has more head injuries or head injury type presentation or cognitive deficits, and I ask the caregiver if there's one thing that we could do here in clinic to make your life easier, what is it that we could do? And, one woman said for her daughter, just be car transfers, like they're killing me, they're getting harder. And so, just kind of going all in, because my perspective, and, you ask a different neurotherapist, you get a different answer, but is that, you can't do a shotgun, like a little of this, 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 and really kind of get anywhere. Remembering that I'm in a chronic, I treat people with chronic stroke. From 4 months to 12 years or 13 years is some of our higher level ones. So someone in acute care, if you're in acute care or acute inpatient rehab, you could probably get away with doing a little bit more scattered, but really trying to prioritize our impairment mitigation. What are the most important impairments that I could address right now? How can it be related to what they want to do by asking them these questions from a motivation standpoint? The other thing the research talks a lot about is self-efficacy. So an individual's belief in his or her ability to achieve their goals. There's different ways to kind of incorporate your patient to help with this. And so again, this is from some of Wolf and Lethwaite's research, but just including them in all the decisions. So it's funny that I read an article and you guys probably done the same thing where I'm like thinking, no, that's never going to work. But since I'm in a clinic with students, I'm like, okay, then we're going to make it a teaching moment. And like, I'm going to go and I'm going to try this thinking it's so not going to work. And then when it does, I'm like, oh my God, that worked. Like, I was so excited. Like, I can't believe that actually worked. And so, some of these have been like that. I can think of someone where we were working on standing balance who's had a severe stroke. He's years post perceptual deficit. You can't, no activation very much on his impaired side. And he's very depressed and, we can't get him to stand. And they used a mirror and they used a bolster to cue him and 50 million verbal cues. I mean, every verbal cue in the whole world that we tried to pull, the crutch that he was insistent if we gave him, he'd be able to walk independently, and nothing worked. And then finally, I went and I read this article and I went in and I said, so, what's going on? Like, why can't you stand up? And he goes, I don't know, like, you're the therapist. I said, but what do you think? And he goes, and I go, just try and think about it. And so really trying to get them to, and this crosses over into attention and, these kind of overlap a little bit, all of them. But, so when he tried to stand up, he fell back down. He goes, I guess I'm not coming forward enough. And I said, I would agree wholeheartedly. So he tried again and went a little further, but still plopped. And I said, so what do you think? He goes, I guess I need to go even further forward, as opposed to me constantly cueing him. And so he then did that and he stood up and he stood up for 8 seconds. And I was really excited. He stood up for 8 seconds. So you might not be as excited. But compared to nothing, just with cueing and making him more aware, asking him, how many times do you think you can do this before, you're going to be too tired, and helping them determine the reps, helping them determine how you can make something harder. And they might not know at first. And so then I might do it with a weighted vest and then do it with resisted walking and then do weights on their ankles, and then do increased speed or pulling a suitcase or doing head turns. And then after I do a bunch of those, then I'll ask them, which one do you think was the hardest, so that we can, kind of work on it together of how to challenge their system more. So that gives them a lot more self-efficacy in regards to them having some control over a situation where they really don't have very much control. Another example is the STEP activity monitoring program. And so some of the newer research by Darcy Reisman talks about the benefits of utilizing that. It's time for them to come in now, so I'm going to give an example of how where's your sister? Sorry. They are covered in snow and they've been out. How long have I been talking? Like 10 minutes? Okay, now we're done, right? Okay, thank you. They're chewing on, that's not me, they're chewing on treats. Okay, sorry, you guys. So for this one, let's see, this muted. This is a really interesting example. So he's one of our clients who's been at our clinic for years and years and years, and he comes in, the students treat him. And in May, it's the end of our clinic time and we don't have clinic over the summer. And so he went to one of our grads and he was getting outpatient because he still falls occasionally and he does better once he's been treated. And then as soon as he has those breaks, usually something happens. And so they started him in May at 0.25 meters per second. And we went to this course by Darcy and she talked about her new research on the step monitoring, and just tracking how many steps they're taking a day. And my grad found out that he was really competitive. And he used to do things like that and count steps. And we didn't know that. We'd known him for a while. I hadn't really asked him straight out. So he started to really get into it. And then he challenged his stroke support group to join him in the step activity monitoring. And by August, he was up to, he doubled from a clinic, or not quite doubled, but for his chronicity, he did clinically significantly improve his walking speed, but then his steps per day significantly improved. And so it was just really exciting. And he got a lot of his stroke group people to join, and then he started going to the Y. So it was really exciting. We were all pretty happy about that. But that's just depending on your setting and depending on, and I'll talk a little bit more in regards to attention. There's little things in regards to external cues and monitoring that we can give. For autonomy support, it's the same thing, self-efficacy, autonomy. It is amazing. And again, they find this a lot with the athletes, but for our clients and patients, the more control they have, the more choice, the better that they do. So I really like circuits and doing circuit training to get increased reps, but to get a variety of functional activities. And I'll talk about that in intensity. But what I like to do is like list out 6 or 7 activities of a circuit. And then when there's 10 minutes left in a session, I'll say, okay, we have enough time to do a three station circuit. What 3 stations do you want to do out of the 7? And, they always choose the bike, which is my least favorite one, but it's usually, or the new step. I mean, not that I don't like it, but it's just that, but it's just that it's much simpler to me. It doesn't challenge them as much, but it gets their heart rate up. I like supine to sit, so I always pick that one because it really challenges their core strengthening, and they hate it because it's really hard. And then, but I get to choose one, and then they can choose however many else we have time for. And I let them choose how many minutes we want to spend, that kind of thing. So those small little pieces of letting them choose and letting them have more options, I think is really beneficial. When you look at task specificity, I think all of us have really great stories. This was one of she's graduated, but at the time she was a student. And this gentleman, what's interesting is that he would fall a couple times a week, and he had been going to outpatient for over a year, almost a year and a half, and he kind of plateaued 2 times a week. And so when he came to us, I said, well, he's going to still go to his outpatient therapist one time and see us once. I said, but we don't want to work on, what everyone else is working on. Let's only work on reactive balance. And I'll talk about reactive balance when I get to that section. But this is my new love and my new focus. I said, all I want you to do is focus on reactive balance, and all your activities, I want you to just keep being creative. So she knew he wanted to go back to fishing, but didn't feel steady on the dock. And so she's like, I kind of want to try to mimic a dock. And her original idea was like just a full wobble board. And I was like, that's going to be too much wobble. A dock doesn't do that. Plus, so we did just enough. And then she thought of putting her fish on the scooter board, and then letting go without him knowing when, which would facilitate a step. And this was actually a great day because my CIs, my clinical instructors, their kids were in the clinic because it was a day off from school for some reason. And they're all sitting around looking really bored. And so I started pulling them up and saying, hey, I need a fish. Can you restock my pond? And they're like, yeah, I want to be a fish. And so he ended up doing this for like 40 minutes. He was sweating bullets. We were monitoring him. He was staying good, but he was sweating bullets. But I was like, are you sure don't you want to stop and rest? He's like, no, I want everyone to get to be a fish. So it was really cool. And he was very excited. And for him, we actually ended up writing him up, and we presented him at CSM and wrote up an article because we only get to see them for 10 total weeks. He's actually treated for 8 weeks, almost more like 7. Again, all the activities were to facilitate reactive balance and focus on retraining that. And he improved in all of his outcome measures clinically significantly. I think except one, but like in 6-minute walk test and 10-meter, all the functional pieces. And he didn't fall for the last 5 weeks of clinic. And so that kind of really got me into the whole reactive balance stuff, which got me into the research that I'll show you in the intensity section. So, what's funny is that when you guys asked for me to present, I was like, well, I got to present at CSM, so it's okay. Although you guys are like all really high level therapists. So, and I knew I was presenting in the last slot on the last day, and, just very motivated people would come. But the pieces that I'm bringing up aren't we all do them. And I think that I just try to structure it in a way to remind us of all the different things that we know, and then to try to just remind us to kind of take a breath and not put so much pressure on ourselves to figure out every aspect of how many reps and what activity and what this, but to, I don't think of good interventions. My patients, I listen to my patients, and then I make something up around what they're interested in. And so I think that piece helps build up that sense of choice and control and helping with patients make decisions. So that's from a motivation standpoint. My goal is, because of my personality, I just like to make sure everyone leaves at least laughing once. But I think that once they see that you're really interested in what they are, I know that we've all found they do better. From the intensity standpoint, I know there's lots of different definitions, and if any of you have heard me talk before, I am not the best I'm not a great writer, and I'm not the best at using the proper choices of words. And so I know there's lots of different definitions, but when I think intensity in this case, I'm just thinking challenge. How are you challenging the system? Whether intensity from a standpoint of aerobic capacity, and we're trying to up the intensity, or are we challenging the muscles and we're actually going to strengthen them versus just have them move back and forth for, 30 reps and not achieve anything? Are we going to challenge, promote error augmentation and get the cerebellum to interact? Are we going to challenge them by having them dual tasking and part of the, problem solving? So I'm looking at intensity as a really broad umbrella. So if you're really into definitions, yeah, this will be a little painful for you, but just think of it as more of a big picture, because I want lots of different strategies. I want you to be able to say, okay, I see my patient, they're pretty much doing it by themselves, and 80% of it they're getting right. So now what could I do? Could I increase the speed? Could I add the head turns? Could I do, check, 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 all these different ideas, and then pay attention to how did that impact them, to know, why. It's always about why, right? That's why we love, we were talking earlier how much we love learning. And that's why every patient is kind of a learning experience. Had some tough ones today in clinic. And it's funny, our clinic, I told some people we almost have and if Ashley's on, she knows, we have like 10 inches of snow out there, 10 inches. And every single one of our clients for neuro clinic from 12 to 4 showed up. And so, we had 7 times 4, over 30 patients show up today, and not one of them missed, even though it was not good out. But they like to come, and they want to be challenged. And I think that although a couple of these articles are older, well, one of them is, and the other 2 are pretty recent. And I know there's articles to show, depending on the facility, that they are getting enough intensity, but really they aren't. And I always felt like I was pushing my patients harder, but it's amazing how you can increase repetitions. We all, as therapists, know we need to do more, but are we really monitoring them to make sure that we're getting them in the target heart rate range, and how much are we doing that? And I know there's a lot of barriers, but it's constantly trying to find little strategies to make that easier. And you might be familiar with, this isn't out yet, but you might have seen in the neuro section, the call for feedback. So Hornby and Darcy and all that big crew went through the clinical practice guideline to improve locomotor function. And they're all about the walking training, but with moderate to high intensities. Virtual reality they find was beneficial with moderate to high intensities. But so is strength training and circuit training and all those, but they have to be intense enough for it to be beneficial. And so I think that just, again, that hasn't come out in its completion yet, but for the most part, not all of us have virtual reality, and not all of us can do high intensities on a treadmill with a harness. And I don't want to just do that, but I think that whatever it is that we do, we want to increase that intensity piece. And from an aerobic component, I guess I've really defaulted now, instead of but walking on the treadmill or doing the bike, I've really gone to a lot more circuits. So the circuits can be supine to sit, then resisted sit to stand, then resisted stepping up and, over a step, and then resisted walking, and then a bike part, and then, but saying 3 minutes, you can rest as much as you need to. And even if you're in acute care, I don't know, I can't remember if anybody, I'm sure someone is, but in acute care or, acute inpatient rehab, they might only be able to do 3 supine to sits, in the 3 minutes or 4 minutes. And that's okay, but you're gonna get more repetitions if you kind of structure it and put those pieces together. And for those that are harder, or if they also have COPD on top of it, or, even if they don't, but like my guys are chronic and some of them don't work out, or after they come back from the summer, they're really bad. The high intensity interval training, the research has obviously gone kind of hog wild on it, and has been extremely beneficial. And in the handout I gave you guys at the end, we tried to go through every single article that we covered in the big presentation and give a little annotated bib underneath it, so you could see if you're interested more in some things in the motivation section, or if you guys have a student right now who's looking for an in-service, you can give that, and you want more on the motivation, I would give, throw them a bone and give them some of those references, and then have them look it up and come up with specific ideas of things that your facility could maybe adjust or adapt. Like the circuit, you could have sheets already made up of different options for circuits and have kind of areas set up in your gym that could just make it easier to do, so that you're not taking up time, because you guys just don't have time. This article by Crozier, so this is in your intensity section. They did, it's either a systematic review or a meta-analysis, I forget right now, but they looked at just, essentially my point in the slide is whatever time you want. Like, do you want to do 30 seconds on and a minute 30 off? Go for it. If you want to do 30 seconds and 45 seconds, you want to do 3 minutes and 3 minutes, there's a whole variety of research in regards to what is the optimal timeframes for HIIT, and depending on how hard you want to work them or what is your actual goal. So just the overall, I think we know the overall benefit is that you're going to get them at a higher heart rate with doing less work for a longer period of time, especially if they're deconditioned. And it's also a lot easier to monitor them, because when they're in their off, time, it's just easier to get their O2 sat and their heart rate or their blood pressure if you need to. And so I think it makes it more realistic in regards to the clinic. And I don't know, and you might all be familiar with, but I was all excited about the heart rate zone app. And over here, if you see on my slide, that was one my husband made for me, like in Excel, was to do counting talk test percentages as well as the target heart rate, and be able to put in your age and your resting heart rate, and then it would all figure it out for you what your ranges are for heart. Well, there's an app for that, of course, that I wish my husband would have made a couple years ago. But and I actually emailed this guy to ask him if I could use this screenshot. But he's like, yeah, I hope it's being used. But it's really cool because you can put the age and resting heart rate in, and then you have your max heart rate, and then you have your percentages using the Carbonin formula. And so that can be really helpful, because that's the one thing from the research is consistent. We're not really pushing them and keeping them in that zone. If your patients are on beta blockers, again, RPE I use with everybody, and some of our chronic guys, they just always say 10. It doesn't matter what. They could be sweating bullets and they're like 10. And it's like, oh, come on, but they want to just keep working harder and harder. So that might not work. For some of our people who have more cognition and communication problems, sometimes I just say fairly light, hard, or very hard. And then, once they get into the very hard, I tell them to remember what that felt like and to ease it down. And so probably similar things you've done, but the heart rate zone app, if you don't have it, I think it's free and it's way fun. And then this picture on the right, I like it because this is what I think about when I think about my patients. It's like, how many areas in the brain can I get to light up? And with intensity, it's kind of like that thing. Like, do you want to add a dual task? Do you want to add this? Do you want to add a pulling? Do you want to increase their aerobic capacity? Like, I look at them, and if I don't need to touch them or do anything, then that brain is not lit up. So I love that picture. But down here, I was there's just I guess there's a bunch of different apps someone was telling me. So I just put some screenshots of different apps of just for the step activity monitoring or just the activity monitoring, to have that type of external cue, you know, that could also help them give them feedback about their intensity. This chart is crossing over into the next section, attention, but I just wanted to highlight it because, again, I love my circuits, but also it's not hard to make a chart, you know, if I'm doing sit to stand, resisted walking and rowing, to note whether it's time, total reps or distance, and then their heart rate and blood pressure, you know, to keep track of that. And whether you have a whiteboard that you can write it up where people can see, and each week they come back so they know externally what they can try to do better, but also from a documentation standpoint. But this is more for the patient. In acute inpatient rehab, it'd be great to have them do something like this and then take it with them when they go to home care or outpatient or skilled nursing, so they can show themselves that they're improving. I mean, we all love our patients because we want to improve their quality of life, and that kind of motivation, I think, is really important, as well as, you know, really a reminder to monitor them, because that's what you can document, and it will help in regards to your documentation component. Just a couple references you may have, but I love Aver's article just in regards to strengthening. So I talked about aerobic challenge, but we also have to challenge from a strengthening standpoint. So 60% threshold, you know, if they're doing 15 reps and they're 13 and 14 are looking a little sketchy, then you're strengthening at 60% challenge. I mean, we have to strengthen them at a level that's going to really help them. So that's a nice reference, as opposed to a 1 rep max, which a lot of people don't do because it's our neural patients and their functional activities. We're not looking at just a muscle, we're looking at functional movements. And I just love this reference just as a visual that you can also use for your patients, that how much more effort is required when they get older for the stairs and standing up from a chair. And just emphasizing that I don't care if I have a 10-pound or a 20-pound weight on that leg, you know, it's never going to equal them stepping up on a step, because they need, you know, 88% or 78% more effort to be able to do that. And you're not going to get your, you know, you need that closed chain component to really challenge them. So I just really liked that visual for you. So if you like that, you can see that. And this is one of the articles on the challenge point framework. And so you see this is a different graph than the one I showed you earlier, but it's just what we've talked about. You're just trying to find the just right, you know, the 3 bears porridge level. And so temperature or whatever. So I guess my main takeaway that I want to emphasize is that we do not know what this is. And anyone who says they do, doesn't, because it's different for every patient. And so just give yourself some freedom to just recognize and reflect. Is it working? Am I challenging them? Try it. And again, if it doesn't work, then move on. You know, do I want to add a weighted vest? Do I want to do eyes closed? Do I want to do dual task? You know, increase the speed, slow the speed down, you know, check, you know, increase the speed and do faster concentric contractions and slow eccentrics to focus on power. I mean, and now a lot of the literature, and I can't remember if it's in this presentation, but a lot of the literature talks about the benefits of working on power training. Once they have enough strength, you got to go power training. That's what's going to improve their ADLs. And so really looking at those fast concentrics and slow eccentrics and kind of working within there. The other thing that I wanted to spend, you know, and some of you, I think a lot of you guys though, are more familiar than when I go out and lecture, is the whole facilitating error and trying to make something worse. You know, giving my NDT background and neuro-infra courses that I've taken, this was a little bit of a hard, it wasn't a hard conversion. Once you see it, it's like, oh my gosh, like that's so awesome. So I still love my NDT hands and I use them a lot, especially with my lower level patients. But now sooner rather than later, I am making them look worse and increasing the challenge, whether I'm putting on a weighted vest or wedging them in the direction they're falling. We're utilizing these pieces to increase the activity of the cerebellum to take part and say, whoa, there's a problem. We need to adjust this. And so then the body starts trying to figure it out themselves. And that's a really important component that we need to do more of. I took that concept, the split belt treadmill research by Darcy, which is the foundation of this motor adaptation stuff, and I had started it with resisted sit to stand, and I don't have time to tell the story, but you know, she couldn't do this to start. She couldn't stand up against resistance, and I kept saying, pull harder, and she's like, and I was talking to someone else and missed the fact that she got it. And she's like, I got it, you just weren't paying attention. And so, you know, it's something where at first you need to help them because it's gonna make them err. You're adding a weight to something that they couldn't even lift before, like going up and down stairs, but they get it afterwards. And how is it possible my battery is low? Must be because I'm zooming. I just got to get a plug. I don't want to lose you guys. So I just, obviously it's going to be one of those nights. Just giving you a chance to stand up and stretch. So she really did. So I just have been messing around with trying to challenge everything and not just with the walking. And so that's one of my favorites that I like to do is resisted sit to stand. And you can do it on your own. It's just that students like to be in video, so I show them. But this is based off Darcy's research of, you know, so those of you who are familiar with it, adding error, adding a weight to the leg that they can't lift up very well is they have enough strength to do it, but we're trying to retrain a motor pattern. And so it tells the cerebellum, you know, send down more, we need to take a bigger step. And by the time their body figures it out, they're taking a bigger step. And then when you take the weight away, they overstep. So, you know, athletes do this all the time, whether it's putting a weight on their bat before they go out and actually hit the ball. It's a short-term process. It lasts short term, but for me, I do it a lot because then it gives me more repetitions of the norm that I'm looking for. And so this was the first person that I came back after going to a course and seeing Darcy's talk about split belt treadmill. So you can see her left side to her impaired side. And I walked in the clinic and I said, we're going to go to the treadmill and try something. And they said, what are we going to do? And I was like, I'm not telling you. And I was thinking, because I don't know. But we put the impaired leg on the edge of the treadmill because I don't have a split belt treadmill because those are very, very expensive. Because if you remember when she was walking, she was taking a really short step with her good leg, right? Because she doesn't want to hang out on her impaired side. This was after 30 seconds on the treadmill because she was so fatigued, her leg got tired standing on it. And it'll loop back around because I just want you to see this. So this is the 30-second treatment. And she said it was the first time she felt like she walked normal. So if you see her short stepping, and again, no cues, I didn't give her cues before or after because I didn't think it'd work. She's taking a bigger step with her left. It's not terrible, but a shorter step with her right. You know, she has that more antalgic, you know, you can see her doing the quick step. And then this was 30 seconds with her impaired side, forcing the good side to take a bigger step and her to stay on that side longer. Hopefully you guys can see that her step symmetry is better. It's even over exaggerated on the right. Now, as soon as she went to leave and walk out, she was a little bit back to her normal gait, but with lots of repetition, you know, doing a 30-second treatment, you know, she's years post. If you can get your people earlier and you can start implementing that now, instead of, we do this still, but a lot of times what I'll do is I'll put about a 7-8 pound weight on the left leg on the impaired side. I mean, no, wait, I said that wrong. I'll put like a 7-8 pound weight on her good leg, sorry. On her good leg in this case, where I want her to have to take a bigger step and stay on her impaired leg longer, take a bigger step with her good leg. If, however, she wasn't clearing her foot and she was dragging her left foot or she was catching her foot on the step, then I would put the weight on that foot. So the overall component, it's hard because I'm limited in time to try to tell you this, but the overall piece, for those of you who are familiar, you know what I'm talking about, but is that whatever error they're doing, you are going to make it worse, which is kind of counterintuitive and goes against most our NDT kind of training, because we want to facilitate them to look normal. but we're only erroring them for a short period of time to get the cerebellum to really kick in and to help us facilitate the normal. So if anyone, because I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with this research by Darcy, but if any of you aren't and you have other questions, I'm happy to try to clarify that, because I just want to make sure that's clear. And then this is just talking about error. No matter what, we want to allow error. And I find that this is really hard if you have the ability to have any kind of systems with the harness. It definitely makes it easier. He has ataxia, so we know that they're a little unpredictable, but it's so hard not to let them err while you're trying to keep them safe. But if I just had corrected, or there's a friend of mine, if she had corrected him immediately and never let him err or process that error, then it's really challenging to show improvement from that. So, you know, then going back down and letting him try it again. And he's someone where we do really high level challenging activities. And he's got a baby on the way, so we make him carry a carrier around. He was carrying a baby yesterday. I said, is there a good weight on that? They're like a 10-pound weight. And then he's carrying the baby. And I was like, please make that baby stop crying. It was funny. You gotta be there. But there you go. Nice adjustment, right? So we're hoping that when you allow the error that they're able to process that. And this kind of goes into the research on perturbation-based balance training. And kind of, it's not newer. I went to a talk at CSM and the guy's like, yeah, I've been studying this for 20 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that whole dissemination of information and knowledge translation is like so real, because I try so hard to keep up on the research. And it wasn't but 5 years ago where I started to get really interested in the whole, you know, I really want to make you slip and fall kind of research. And so I'm just going to show you a video from the research couple groups, two groups, my student groups did. They're coming back in 2 weeks, and we'll analyze the data more specifically. But we utilized a slip trainer. So some of the research uses treadmills, start-stop on the belt. But a lot of the research is done in a lab where the clinicians can't really repeat the activities. And so one of my grad students, the fishing one, shout out to Taylor, she found this slip trainer for me. So, and we bought it. And what we did for our research project is we did 4 2-minute bouts of this training, one session. We only saw them once. So if you can see, she timbers like a tree. And so this is her first 2-minute session. So what we found was they couldn't last more than 2 minutes. We were pretty much, we want to write one poster up as a feasibility study, because that's what I wanted, is how could clinicians mimic this? So it took us a long time to figure out, okay, how do you mimic 24 slips, or how do you mimic some of Pi's work, some of the people who've been studying this. The trips are obviously always going to be better. Slips are usually your biggest concern, but you can do side-to-side stepping on this as well. You just turn her. But our study was purely slips and trips. This was the last 2-minute bout. So this was so she had 8 total minutes of therapy. This was her last 2 minutes. And if you can see her stepping reaction, she's being pushed harder and quicker. We couldn't measure force, but we measured distance. We just put, you know, our pushers were pushers. We had 2 pusher guys, and they really pushed hard and fast. And so after 8 minutes, we really saw good reactions in her. This is my 90-year-old, and I didn't know there was a camera. I forgot about the camera because I was just carried about her. But she only did 2 2-minute bouts. I even told her she didn't have to do that because she was screaming really loud. So that's why we have volume muted forever on these videos, because most of them screamed. It's really scary. And we showed them a video and we did all this pre-prep training, but look at her. But when she does the last 2 minutes, this is just 2 minutes later. I mean, as she rested. And then she was so happy. She was so excited. She's like, I totally get it. I get what you're trying to get me to do. I understand. When she came back from post-testing 2 weeks later, because again, we only did this once. She came back for post-testing and she asked for the articles because she used to be a teacher and she was the cutest thing in the whole world. I said, can I get your release so I can show your video everywhere? Because you made my day. So she was very excited to do that. So that research is right now my big area of love that I'm looking to continue to work on. And so just, again, kind of tying things together, whether you're challenging them through aerobic component, like the exercise, the video, or external cues, which I'm going to show you a video in a minute. The key components are, you know, I could do it aerobically. I could, if I'm really strengthening muscle, am I really strengthening it to those levels that I included? Could I be challenging them with reactive balance, obviously in a safe, you know, a safe way, which we just assumed. But those are different components that just think it's so much fun, right? That's what we love, is there's lots of different options. And I'll read you guys, you know, I'm not going to read to you definitions, but I did include them. I'm going to focus on knowledge of results and really an external focus. The Ciros article is an article I always show, if any of you have heard me talk before, because it's just amazing to me in this article that the only difference in the two groups, because they were matched, was that one group was told how fast they walked for each one of the sessions, and the other group was told nothing about how fast they walked. And just with giving them that feedback, it was 0.19, that should be a point there, sorry, 0.19 meters per second difference. So almost double clinical significance for the geriatric population. But just by doing that, and so hence the tables that I showed you before, you know, the tables for circuit of how many reps, or anything external. Gait speed is one of my favorites. If you guys don't have this chart, email me, because I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint, because Middleton, Fritz, and Lusardi gave me the approval to give that PowerPoint out. Just include their reference. This is the updated one from 2015. If you have the 2009 one, this is updated. But just to show them, look at, you are, most of my guys in our clinic are 0.3 to 0.4 meter per second walkers. And, you know, you can document that risk, you know, to show that gait speed is not the be all end all, but it is really important. And this is a great visual for them to not scare the crap out of them, obviously, sorry, it's late at night. But to just try to show them, why are we working on this? What does it matter? And look at, I want to get you up into the green. And to give you options for if you lose your balance and those types of things. But from an external cue standpoint, doing gait speed is just so easy. 10-meter walk, have it marked at the beginning of when they walk in, and you know, and then mark it out somehow where they don't even know, and that every single time you're checking that gait speed, and you're giving them that external cue, and you're keeping track of it with them, with their visual. I gave you guys the reference for the new outcome measures. That's in your handout, but I can also, again, do this PDF if people want it. But these are the 6 that the core set of outcome measures that they've decided on from a clinical practice guideline, the neuro PT section. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Again, another little, I'm a little obsessed with my tables. But I just think this idea of giving someone a table and having them see every time what kind of cues that they had, whether it's targets, which I'll show, or, you know, an external cue of, you guys can't see me point to the screen, an external cue of hitting the ball with the bottom of the foot versus bend your knee. So a bend your knee is more of an internal cue, where an external cue is hit the ball with the bottom of your foot. And so there's the knowledge of results piece. Sorry, I made a quick transition there for time. But the knowledge of results piece is your showing them what their gait speed was, showing them how fast they were able to walk, how many sit-to-stands were they able to do, you know, timing things. Where your external focus, which is another component of attention, is getting them, is really better than internal focus, because of all the things that I listed there. Less mental effort and efficiency, improved efficiency. It's amazing if we can just get them to focus their attention away from them thinking through a brain that has damage to a body part that doesn't feel, to tell a muscle that doesn't really work, to force them to try to do a movement. They generally move in a synergy. And so if we can switch that cue to where, instead of straighten your arm, which is an internal cue, me telling the arm to straighten, but to reach for the glass. I mean, again, a lot of you guys probably do this automatically. I don't think I do. And I have to really think about, because I'm old now, and so you guys are all way younger, but I have to really think about how I adjust my cue to make it external, for it to be easier for them. You know, tighten your bottom is an internal cue, and I've given that cue a million times, and then my student said, bring your hips towards the walker, because it wasn't working and I wasn't paying attention enough to see that. So just some things about external focus. And I think just because I'm running out of time and I want to be conscientious of people's schedules, I will definitely PDF, because this is a nice example of counting steps if people haven't seen that. You know, I do have a love of boxing gloves. And so, you know, switching to just a basic cue to making sure that you give them a target. If not the boxing glove, then the sparring glove. You know, anytime you can add that, see, he prefers that one. Anytime he can get something external, that would be considered an external cue. Doing an external cue, I'm going to skip a little bit of this. Essentially, she has some spasticity, and so we are really focusing on strengthening. And strengthening, you know, an external cue would be measuring how well she was able to jump. Actually, I need to go up here for a second. You just have to see her pre-jump. So when you see her pre-jump, this is how she started. Well, she started off worse than this, really. She didn't even know how to jump, and you can see her spasticity kind of kick in. But then when we switched to really trying to give her more external cues, because I could tell her, jump higher. No, jump higher. It wasn't that she wasn't trying. She was trying as hard as she could. Let her error, let her fall back down, so to speak. No real falling. But and give her that external cue of where to jump. And she loved the challenge. And then it's like, okay, well then let's adjust again, because she always stops and hesitates. I'm like, don't stop, keep going. You know, and so then they were being ambitious with this next cue. I was like, oh, I don't think I like this one. The next one after she has to jump over it. But it was a really good external cue because she didn't mess around. Way better than, see her face, she was very happy. Way better, and then able to put all the pieces together. I had to slow mo that one because I was all so happy about that. But those external cues really make a huge component. So hopefully in that quick little ditty, sorry, I didn't edit more, but is that just some ideas of regards to, I mean, a lot of them you already know. Hopefully maybe there's a couple new ones that you can just think of when you're treating your patient to see, can I add something a little bit more motivating? Can I add them as part of making choices and decisions? Can I add some intensity in some way, shape, or form? Or can I adjust their attention and give more external cues to do that? So that was fast. I'll PDF and post, I swear. Oh, I'm glad your dog liked it.
That was fantastic. I feel like I want to ask you questions for like another hour because I have like a million ideas for my patients and stuff. I definitely would love for you to send us the PDF and for us to maybe have like a follow-up day with the cases and discussion time or something. Wouldn't you guys think that would be great? Yay. Oh
and
my
even
gosh.
if I was just thinking if there was a way to do maybe one of your posts, you know, Erin, one of your posting my networks to post something, because I know that all of these guys here have really way great ideas, and
yeah,
we could like organize it with MIA. I mean, just for the sake of supporting the
topic,
the theme, you know, and then people could just post some different their favorite MIA. I don't know. I would just love. I didn't give you guys any time to talk. Sorry. So I would just love to hear your guys's things that you guys use that are your favorites.
That's a great idea. So we can make a topic so we can put your PDF file in there. Yeah. And then any questions or things people want to bring up, and then we can we'll follow up with you to schedule another time that we can do it where people have time to watch your recording of this. And then we can kind of come back together and chat more about it. But then obviously people can reach out to you via, which way would you prefer people contact you if they have questions about people and they want to talk more?
Yeah, email. Either email is my NAS or the Gmail is great. And I have my email at the end of that handout that you do already have. But I'll send this to you guys tonight so that then you can post this PDF whenever you get to it.
Okay, perfect. Yes, and then we'll post the recording when it's done too.
And I also think it would be really cool if people have like a challenging case, you know,
I
maybe
do.
there's at all of like the ability to get like a little bit of video and to bring it in and then be able to like get some, you know, ideas and feedback.
That'd be awesome.
Especially like, you know, when it's a diagnosis, like I said, a lady who has stroke now, that is not the, ouch, stop. That is not the diagnosis that I work with most of the time. I am struggling with the whole like working on gait training, and like I don't have a treadmill with a harness right now, so we're doing a lot of overground, and there is such a desire to be like, put your foot here, step out, dip there, all the internal. And so I'd love, you know, like a video and kind of like, okay, what are you know, these things that we highlighted, what are the different ways that I can be implementing? Like just a reminder, okay, we're gonna walk a lap in your home. How long do you think it's gonna take you? Predict it, let's measure it, let's talk about it afterwards, let's then try to do it better. But, you know, not that it should be me and my client, but anybody who has one, like that would be a cool session to do too.
Yeah,
it'd be fun.
And talk through it, because yeah, I think everybody, especially, and sometimes when it's not your own patient, it's almost easier to come up with those ideas. Like when it's your own patient, you want them to get better so badly. Sometimes I feel like that like holds me back a little bit from actually coming up with as good of ideas.
Yeah, so this would be awesome. Let's continue this for sure. And thank you all so much for joining. Thanks, JJ, for doing this late night and good doing all this work to edit it for us. This was just wonderful and awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, Claire.
Thanks, guys.
So I may need help if I take a video how to post it, like add it to the group. So maybe I'll have to email you and figure that out. I have a challenging case right now, a TBI gentleman who was post 10 years who I like to take a video and have you guys look at him and give me some suggestions.
Why don't you make a folder in the Google Drive that we shared, make a folder for patient videos or something like that. Make sure you get their consent and everything. Then just pop the videos into the Google Drive.
Okay.
Yeah, you could make like in the Google Drive, we could make like a folder for patient videos, and then you could put your name and then like put them in there so you know like how to get your videos easily. And we can pull them up and share a screen next time so everybody can look at them.
Yeah, we can all do that. Cool. I gotta run. Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
JJ. That was awesome.
Right.
Bye.